does your legacy echo through the centuries? You know, in those terms, he is one of the most important kings of England. Things he set up, we still live with in all sorts of ways. I've got loads of quotes from Churchill because we're going back into that sort of stream of things. But before I start there, just to say, we did Henry I, and then there's the period of anarchy. I don't think we've done an epochs purely on the anarchy, that of the Empress Matilda, who is Henry II's mother, and Stephen of Blois. So just a quick few minutes on that, super quick. Henry I dies. He would have had a son who himself was killed in the White Ship incident. We definitely covered that.
Yeah.
So there was no male heir. So he tries to get his daughter, Matilda, or Maud, to be a queen or a female king. It was weird, but there you go. And she was an empress simply through dint of having been married to the Holy Roman Emperor earlier. She wasn't a true empress in her own right or anything. No. Anyway, one other thing to say here, straight off the bat, is that Henry II and his heirs weren't known as Plantagenet until much later. It comes from their Anjou heritage, his father's side, and I'll talk about that in a moment. At the time, he was known as Henry Fitz-Empress, i.e. son of an empress.
Yeah.
That's what he was known as at the time. So another thing I'd like to say right off the bat, I don't know if you remember, because it was quite a few months ago now, maybe a year or more ago now, when we were talking about the reigns of, well, when the Anglo-Saxon line ended, the House of Wessex, with sort of the Confessor, and there was some prophecies, whether they're true or not, or it's all said in hindsight, that England, the green tree of England, metaphorically, would never sort of grow and thrive again until its severed trunk had been reunited. And historians and chroniclers at the time, or not long after certainly, said that Henry II embodies that. Because he is the grandson directly of Henry I. So his great-grandfather was the conqueror. But then through his mother, in a bit more of a tangential way, is also related to the House of Wessex, the old Anglo-Saxons.
Right.
It is a little bit more... Well, his mother's mother was Matilda of Scotland, whose mother was Margaret of Wessex.
Right.
Who was the daughter of Edward the Exile.
So, European royal politics.
Son of Edmund Ironside, who was son of Ethelred the Unready. So it's a bit, good few generations there, but sorry, I cut you off.
But it is a definitive linkage. So, if there was a prophecy, I guess you could see it fulfilled in this.
Yeah, if you really tried. Yeah, you can.
Well, I don't even think you have to try that hard.
Right, yeah.
He is direct descendant, there's no question.
Yeah. So on his mother's side, he's, his father wasn't a king, but on his mother's side, he's the grandson and great-grandson of the Norman conquerors, and got that House of Wessex blood in there as well.
So he's got the blood of kings in him.
Yeah, not too far back. And on his father's side, his father was the Count of Anjou, Geoffrey of Anjou, Henry Plantagenet. Apparently he'd wear a particular yellow flower, and in French, I won't bother going into it, but in French it's sort of where the word Plantagenet comes from. Yeah. So that's where that comes from. At the time, they would more often say Angevin rather than Plantagenet. Plantagenet was a bit of a later thing. Okay, so you've got like the 20 years of anarchy. After Henry I dies, Matilda and her own cousin, Stephen of Blois, dispute the throne, and it is about 20 years long. I mean, Henry II here is like about 2 years old when that kicks off. And in a way, his mother's side of this anarchy, this civil war, is sort of all in aid of him in a way. I mean, she wanted to be queen.
Sure.
At one point, she did get herself crowned queen in Westminster Abbey, but the Londoners didn't like that, and she was kicked out quite quickly, and it's all messy. But in the end, she was sort of too old, really, for, if her side did ever win, that she would ever sort of become the monarch. It was sort of good after a certain point, once he became old enough.
Yeah.
And then by the time it does all come to fruition, he is in his early 20s.
Yes, she's not going to be the first matriarch who manoeuvres herself to be the queen mother.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Tale as old as time.
And so by the time he is in his early 20s, then Stephen of Blois dies of natural causes, probably.
That's lucky.
And he had a son as well.
I love these. Sorry, just to interrupt. I love these coincidental deaths. Again, these happen all the time, and it's just that people died relatively young in the past because the past was rough. But it always is very coincidental.
Well, Stephen of Blois had a son who, if you insisted Stephen's claim was legit, his son should have got it.
Right.
Was it a Eustace? He just happened to die as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dangerous time in the Middle Ages.
He may have been poisoned by some monks. Either way, the path was cleared for Henry Fitz-Empress to become King of England. And it seemed, if you believe some of the accounts, a quick word on the accounts, there's people like Walter Map, Gerald of Wales, John of Salisbury, Richard Fitz-Neal, Peter of Blois, and many other people in the centuries after chronicled all this sort of thing. But
so it's quite well attested then.
Yeah, there's quite a few people at the time that chronicled things at the time that have survived, at least in part.
Because that's really lucky, because most of the time we've got to deal with literally one or two sources on whatever it is.
So if we go back to William the Conqueror, for example, there's very little, relatively little anyway, compared to this. So now I could say that in the reigns of Henry II and Richard and John, we see sort of a little bit of an explosion of the sources. They very deliberately patronised lots of chroniclers and historians and poets and all sorts of things. So as far as the historian is concerned, we've sort of fairly suddenly got a lot more to go on.
Wonderful.
So that's great. Yeah. Of course, as any good cynical historian should be, you have to be careful of who's paying them to say that and all that sort of stuff. History will be kind to
Henry because he intends to write it.
Yeah, right. So when he takes over, we're told, if you believe the accounts, that a lot of England rejoiced because they were like, if nothing else, the anarchy's over.
And that seems very likely to me.
Yeah.
My God, and thank God there's no more troops of armed men coming through to conscript us or steal our provisions in order to go fight a battle I don't care about.
Yeah. If nothing else, assuming this new guy has got a strong hand, at least we can have like a government back.
Yeah.
Because the anarchy, just very quickly to say, seems to have been really terrible. It wasn't just a few knights fighting each other. It turned into like widespread famine and things. Like a true decline of the whole country, certainly in the south, where fields went untilled and there was famine and all that sort of stuff. So it was really quite bad. So hopefully that would be over, and there was apparently rejoicing in the streets and stuff. And it looks like this young new Henry is going to be strong or firm, because the House of Anjou, House of Plantagenet, has got a reputation for being no pushovers. That is part of their reputation. But one quote here, the first of many from Churchill, he said, "The accession of Henry II began one of the most pregnant and decisive reigns in English history. The new sovereign ruled an empire and, as his subjects boasted, his warrant ran from the Arctic Ocean to the Pyrenees. England to him was but one, the most solid, though perhaps the least attractive, of his provinces. But he gave to England that effectual element of external control which, as in the days of William of Orange, was indispensable to the growth of national unity. He was accepted by English and Norman as the ruler of both races and of the whole country. The memories of Hastings were confounded in his person, and after the hideous anarchy of civil war between robber barons, all due attention was paid to his commands. Thus, though a Frenchman, with foreign speech and foreign modes, he shaped our country in a fashion of which the outline remains to the present day." Mm-hmm. And we'll get into it in a bit, but in all sorts of ways that's true. I mean, echoes of, sure, but certain things put in place by him, we still have, or at least were only done away with in the 19th or 20th century, things like that. So, lasted a long time. So one thing to say that, again, Nicholas Vincent pointed out, is that where he's got this sort of pretty incredible lineage, at least on his mother's side, on his father's side, he wasn't the son of a king, though.
Yeah.
So there's always that. So there's always this element, it seems, that he's got something to prove. Or that it's just not the absolute perfect. You're not sort of born to the purple.
Yeah.
He had to wrest control, at least of the crown of England, off of Stephen of Blois, who himself was some sort of usurper. So, tit for tat, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, swings and roundabouts. But nonetheless, his dad wasn't the anointed king. So that's something that historians have pointed out. Churchill goes on to say, after 100 years of being the encampment of an invading army and the battleground of its quarrelsome officers and their descendants, England became finally and for all time a coherent kingdom, based upon Christianity and upon the Latin civilization which recalled the message of ancient Rome. Henry Plantagenet first brought England, Scotland and Ireland into a certain common relationship. He re-established the system of royal government which his grandfather, Henry I, had prematurely erected. He relaid the foundations of a central power based upon the exchequer and the judiciary, which was ultimately to supersede the feudal system of William the Conqueror. The king gathered up and cherished the Anglo-Saxon tradition of self-government under royal command in shire and borough. He developed and made permanent assizes, types of court, legal courts, as they survive today. A quick note to say, up until 1972, when that was all done away with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but Churchill was writing in the 40s, just after World War II.
Right.
Or perhaps just before. But might have wrote it before and it was published after. Anyway, that was still the case up until 1972. Incredibly. It is to him we owe the enduring fact that the English-speaking race all over the world is governed by English common law rather than the Roman. I mean, that's something right there, isn't it? To say that's, like I say, the shadow of his memory cast down through the centuries. By his constitutions of Clarendon, he sought to fix the relationship of church and state and to force the church in its temporal character to submit itself to the life and law of the nation. In this endeavour, he had, after a deadly struggle, to retreat, and it was left to Henry VIII, those centuries later, to avenge his predecessor by destroying the shrine of St Thomas at Canterbury. So we'll get into all of that when we talk about, at least in passing, Thomas Becket again.
Yeah.
But the constitutions of Clarendon, sort of in a nutshell, the king, the crown, the secular power is above the church. Yep. Be in no doubt. And it's fair to say, isn't it, that only really got properly decided by Henry VIII.
There's always been a kind of spirit of it, though. There's always been a kind of strange, even back to the Anglo-Saxon days, the English viewed their church as theirs, which is interesting. I put it down to just being an island or something, I don't know. But there's always been this weird sort of breakaway spirit in just the islands.
Then there's that relationship between archbishops of Canterbury, or even the Pope himself from Rome, trying to sort of dominate.
Yeah, absolutely.
At various times.
It's always been a power struggle.
Yeah.
But the power of like self-determination has always been there and has always been influential.
No, it's true. Yeah. To be honest, there are certainly examples throughout history in Europe, more often in Europe, where a cardinal or an archbishop or someone or a particular pope has really dominated all sorts of crowns, kingdoms, all types of sovereignty, genuinely dominated them. It's usually an unfair struggle. Usually it's not the case. In Britain, rarely, really. I mean, the story of Becket is one example of where, on some level, for a brief period, at no point did he really stand above the king, but there was a genuine struggle, at least you can say, a genuine struggle.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.